Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going over how to cut down a tree. Now let's start off with a couple quick disclaimers. I am not a professional at removing trees. I've done this a couple times as a hobbyist and a homeowner. Treat this as educational and know that this is extremely dangerous. If you screw this up, it might not only cause significant property damage, it can easily destroy a house, a fence, or a car, but it can also quite literally kill you or kill somebody else. So if you're not sure and you're not confident doing this, don't do it on your own and hire a professional. Now with that said, let's get into it. Here's the couple second synopsis. Clear the low limbs, plan your landing zone, apply any anchors, I'll talk about this at the end, V-cut the direction that you want the tree to fall, relief cut on the back, and run out of the way as you scream timber. Alright, now let's cover these steps in a little bit more detail. First things first is always be safe, and a big part of that is making sure that nothing's gonna hit you in the face and that you have good footing so that you don't accidentally trip and fall, especially when you're trying to outrun a tree that's falling down. The first thing you're gonna wanna do is clear up any brush or any small branches that are around that are going to be interfering with you working in that area, or that could create an obstruction or hit you on the way as the tree's falling and you're trying to escape. So what I started by doing was clearing all of the surrounding brush and then chopping off a bunch of these lower limbs and getting them to the side so that way I had a clear working space and I could clearly see what I was doing. And while you're doing this, you should notice which way the tree is already leaning if it does have a natural lean to it. As I've said in a previous video, trees are extremely heavy. They can go up to tens of thousands of pounds between the weight of the wood and all of the moisture in it. Even this tree here, which doesn't appear very large but is about 25 to 30 feet tall, this one all in is probably just over 1,000 pounds. So you might have just come here thinking, I'm just gonna do some cool lumberjack stuff, I'm gonna swing an axe and it's gonna be great. Yeah, not really. This is actually a rather complex physics problem where you have to figure out where all of that weight is, how it's distributed over the branches, and if this wasn't supported at the base, where is this going to naturally want to fall on its own just based on how the weight is distributed. So for example, if I have this tree and it's equally distributed on the left and the right side, you can see that it's probably going to be relatively balanced, but this isn't how most trees are. Trees tend to favor the side that gets more sun because that's where they get their energy, so realistically you'll probably see something more like this. So when you cut it at the base, it naturally wants to fall towards this side. That's where all the weight is. It's going to go towards that side because the weight is going to pull it down. But in a lot of scenarios, where it wants to naturally fall isn't necessarily where you want it to fall. So for example, this tree here, if it naturally fell, would either go into my neighbor's yard or would completely demolish the fence that's next to it, and fences, as I figured out, are also thousands of dollars to replace, so I really don't want to damage that. What you need to do is cut a V into the side of the trunk, and this V is basically going to point in the direction that the tree is going to fall. The distribution of the weight might pull it slightly to one side or the other, but basically wherever this V is pointing is more or less your aiming system for how this thing's gonna topple over. Really take your time making sure that this V cut is facing perfectly towards where you want this tree to go, because if this cut is off at all, it will cause the tree to fall down in a different direction. And the only way to really know how much it might get pulled to one side or the other is through practice and experience, which most likely you don't have yet. That's part of what makes doing this so incredibly dangerous, is that if you get it wrong and it falls towards you, you're not gonna live to try again. Now the other reason you start with this V-cut is that if you try to go straight through the tree, the weight of the tree itself will slowly clamp down on the saw or the axe as you're cutting through it, and it will get stuck in the middle. How deep you're going to go with this V-cut is going to be very dependent on how big the tree is and how the weight is distributed, but anywhere from a quarter to a half of the tree seems pretty typical. Now this cut alone is not going to make the tree fall. You're going to do a relief cut on the back, but before you do that, plan your escape route. Once again, you want to make sure that there's no other branches that are going to swing into your face when you start cutting the backside and the tree starts falling. You want to make sure you have a clear escape route so that if it does fall the wrong way, you have a plan to get out of the way. And you want to make sure that escape route is clear so that you're not running through other bushes or over other tree roots that could trip you up, because again, if you screw this up, it's not going to be a good scenario. Before you start your relief cut, do one final check to make sure the landing zone of where the tree is going to fall is clear. Make sure there's no people in the way and that everyone else around knows that the tree is going to fall so that they're safe as well. But once that's all taken care of, you are ready to make the relief cut in the back of the tree, and this is the cut that is going to make the tree fall over. You're going to take your axe or your saw and you're going to cut straight in on the far side from where your V cut was, basically where the V is pointing. So if we look at the side side of the tree trunk. You can see the V-cut is here. I'm going to cut right here, going straight in evenly across the back, getting towards the back of that V. And you're not going to get all the way to the tip of it before the tree starts to fall. Basically, by cutting out that V, you're removing the support there, and the tree wants to fall in that direction. And then it's pulling up and creating tension on that backside. So when you put that cut through the backside on the opposite side of the V, what's happening is the tree is slowly pulling itself apart, and you're basically cutting across the strings and the fibers that are holding it and preventing it from doing so. As you slowly cut away enough of those, the weight of the tree alone is going to be enough to pull apart the remaining piece and cause the tree to fall over. You also have the option of yelling timber, but your focus should be on not getting hit because, again, that's not a good scenario to be in. But at this point, the tree should have landed roughly where you thought it would, and you can chop it into smaller sections and dispose of it as you wish. But let's say you need a tree to land in one area and most of the weight is pulling it in a different direction. Now, this is a little more complicated, a little more advanced, and as a result, a lot more dangerous. You're basically trying to counter the force of a full tree by doing other things that are, quite frankly, a little bit sketchy. So for example, you'll see the second tree trunk is leaning in the wrong direction over my neighbor's yard, and I don't want it to fall there because, again, I don't want to damage their property. This is a smaller tree, so it's relatively lower risk, but what I'm going to do is take a couple of ratchet straps and I'm basically anchoring it to a point that's in the direction I want it to fall, to a solid heavy object. As the tree gets bigger and heavier, or as it's more and more off balance, you need a more solid foundation that you're supporting it against, and you need stronger straps with more force to counter that weight. So like I said, as it's more off balance, this gets increasingly sketchy and increasingly dangerous. But the general premise is you're going to apply additional force in the direction that you want it to fall to outdo the forces that would cause it to fall in a different direction. Then you're going to do the same thing where you're going to make the V in the direction you want it to fall, and then finally your relief cut. Just know that if you're doing this, the chances of you miscalculating where it wants to fall go up dramatically, and the chances of it falling towards you go up dramatically as well. But that is the basics of how to cut down a tree. Hopefully this helped you guys out, and please, for the love of God, be safe and hire a professional if you don't know what you're doing. But that'll do it for this episode. I want to thank you guys for watching, and I will see you next time.